speaker today is Vilma Dahiana.
Sí.
And her presentation is on sustainable economic development in post-conflict Colombia. Very interesting. Thank you very much. And please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for your introduction. I'm Vilma Bedoya. Come from Colombia, as you will say, and I want to make clear that anything I will say here must not be considered as a government position or communication as official communication of the government, because I'm here as an independent, as a citizen, to show and to share my point of view, or perhaps the point of view of many of Colombian citizens about the post-conflict and the peace agreement that recently was signed in our country with one of the oldest guerrillas in the world. Thank you. This one? Okay. Well, the guerrilla of the FARC and the Colombian government signed recently a peace agreement regarding sorry, I'm a bit nervous. We will talk about the support that
take your time, don't worry.
That private enterprises could offer to offer a better and stable peace, and to understand better the context. In the chart, we can see a distribution of the ethnical affiliation of my country. 85%, almost 86%, does not have an ethnical affiliation. With this, I want to show that mostly our conflict is not for ethnical reasons, but for political. Some minority groups, as indigenous and Afro descendants, are still seeking political representation and fundamental rights equity. The nature of the conflict, as I said, it's political. And this majority is conformed by descendants from the Spanish heritage and the mixture of the people that came from Africa, the indigenous, and the Spanish itself. Now, briefly, we will see the history of the conflict. As I said, we were conquered by the Spanish in about 1525. By 1819, there were a war like the Independence War. Yeah. By 1899, to 1902, the War of the Thousand Days between the liberal and conservatives, which is the same to the Republicans and Democrats in the United States. Yeah, it was like the beginning of the war, because to be honest, during the history of our country, the politicals has been just divided into groups, and the problem is that there's no participation for other points of view. In 1948, in the middle of an electoral campaign, one of the most privileged candidates was killed, and it was the beginning of the Bogotazo. It gave, as a result, the present conflict that we had. Because after that point, some other groups of guerrillas born, as the FARC in 1964 and the M19 in 1971. In 1985, was quite recent, the M19 tried to take the power by taking they tried to enter to the Palace of Justice. And in this event, many people disappear, and most of them are still disappeared in hands of the regular forces. One of the theories is that of the fire of that building, it's that it was with the intention of delete all the backup of information about narco-traffickants in the process of extradition at that time. At the same year, again, that same year it was founded a political party that gave space for left groups as the FARC and other communist parties, and it was called the Patriotic Union. But in the coming years, its members were systematically killed to almost zero. By 1989, the M19 becomes a big political party, but in the same year, the candidate from the UPP presidential candidate and the Liberal Party were murdered during the presidential campaign of that year. By 1990, we have a new constitution that gave some rights that performed the participation in politics in our country. In 2012, the current president, 2002, the president announced the start of a strong war in all the rural places where the guerrillas evaded, because the process of peace that they well developed failed. Yeah, sorry. Wait. All that history ended almost last year when President Mr. Manuel Santos, when he began the process of peace with the guerrilla in 2010, ended with the signature in 2016. Yep. Today, the government is facing a war against the FARC dissidents and the ELN guerrilla, whom stopped their recent peace talks developed in Quito, Ecuador, in the last year. It's hard to come here to talk about peace when still there are signs of violence from these dissidents groups, but the figures of the conflict were so strong and made us to move towards the peace. As we can see, the Colombian conflict left more than 7.9 million of victims, many more than the other confrontations in the world. As Sudan, with 200,000 victims, and Sierra Leone, with 120,000 victims, more or less. Then we have other conflicts at Rwanda, Guatemala, El Salvador, Peru, and Argentina, which had about 8,000 disappear or more. The final agreement, it's a document that it's divided in 6 chapters. But here we will just mention in detail those who have a direct relation with economic development. In chapter 1, we have a comprehensive rural reform, the sources for land found, and the right to private property. The agreement has as the victims as beneficiaries of all that. The rural development economic model involves a plan for territorial development. In chapter 2, they consider political participation, and as a part of that, the known as FARC guerrilla, founded a party called Common Alternative Revolutionary Force. The idea is to guarantee their participation in the Congress with 10 positions there. Just replying them with their need of being political active participants of the development of the country. In Chapter 3, they consider the end of the conflict with details and or steps to develop the agreement. One of the most biggest problem in Colombia is the drugs problem. Then in Chapter 4, they try to specify the solution for that problem with an idea that could be involved also in economic terms, that it's the illicit crop substitution. It means they try to change the crops of illegal drugs for food and other sources for the people. In Chapter 5, they consider the victims, and they made something that it's the first time that have been developed in the world of conflict agreements, of conflict solutions, sorry. It's called the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. There, they gave the voice for victims and hear their stories, and even in front of the criminals that made the things they do, they just try to hear both parts also. In Chapter 6, we have implementation and verification. The role of the private enterprises involving the private sector, as we have considered as long as this Congress, the role of PPPs is the way in which the companies could really have an active role. 2 minutes? No, no longer. It's just this and this. Okay. The social preparation for the post-conflict Colombia is important because most of the companies doesn't know what happened, doesn't know, they don't know the history of the conflict, and they don't know how they could contribute. There are other benefits for them in taxes to the companies that want to invest in the most affected areas of the conflict. And the establishment of small and medium-sized enterprises, it's very important because they constitute the majority of the companies in the country. So it's more about education than the restriction or perhaps persecution of ideas. I just wanted to share some economic review about Colombia. As you could see, last year the inflation began to decrease, but the government take the decision to increase the value-added tax to all the products of regular consumption, and so it made that the consumption in the country decreased by the end of the last year and the beginning of this. Here I have some insights about how to start a business in Colombia. If you want more details, I could share it with you. And this, for me, this is the final. But with this, we could see the real problem. We are just emphasizing all in the fossil fuels and mining products, but we have all the potential to grow in farming, food, and beverages, especially in the agricultural sector, because we have all the sources to do it. As country, we have the land, we have the knowledge, and I think that politicians must put more interest and more sources in support the rural development for the economical growth too. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And well, we have 5 minutes left, I suppose. Is there any? Right? Yep. Thank you. Mike, yeah.
Yep, I got the mic. So thank you, Chairman. Colombia, Argentina, Peru, El Salvador, Sudan, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, all these countries have conflicts. And the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, aim this year is to include peace in all development goals. Without peace, there cannot be no development. There can be no sustainable development. When you look at 2 billion people of the developing world who depend on agriculture, for instance, for their export revenue earnings, domestic savings, employment, and sustenance, we have to look at peace, and the idea of peace dividend being included in the sustainable development triangle of environment, social, and economic has to be included in there. And lastly, let me give you another point. Coffee, of which Colombia also produces coffee. Yes, the whole edifice of the $1 trillion global value chain is rested on the backs of hard-pressed farmers, poor farmers. If Colombians do not have peace, how do we get sustainable development in there? Thank you.
Sir, it's okay? Yeah. Do you want to? Yep.
I just want to say that I'm pretty agree with you, because peace must be taken as a right, not as a political privilege. That's all.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
In regards to what you just said at the end regarding sustainable peace in the rural areas, the SDG 17.17, if you look at the text, says public, private, and civil society partnerships. Now, in the rural areas, this could easily be cooperatives, because cooperatives are, I think, in Colombia too, maybe a viable way to organize themselves to produce something and to take care of poverty and other issues. So there are examples that exist where cooperatives also partner with private companies with a government that supports it. So I think it would be worthwhile to look into this as a way to achieve at the same time peace and make the whole piece also economically viable in terms of development. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, there are many of those cooperatives, not only in coffee, but in other products. And the government, with institutions as ProColombia, are supporting the exports of those products. So the government has the tools. Perhaps there is still like a lack of interest of some of the private enterprises that they, as I see, they don't have like the commitment to be involved in this process, especially the companies located in the principal cities that don't have like a direct touch with the rural problems, despite that they depend on them, because from rural it's from the products come.
Thank you very much. I think I'm afraid, please, short.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. It's more of a comment, just because having recently, Malaysia, I'm from the Permanent Mission of Malaysia, and having recently hosted the 9th World Urban Forum in Kuala Lumpur in February, I'm just inclined to share some takeaways from the forum, where the forum was represented by about 165 member states and a broad range of stakeholders from UN agencies to civil society, which really reflected a very firm and global commitment towards this goal of creating sustainable cities and communities. And from there, we had the theme of Cities 2030, Cities for All. And the forum presented participants to look back at the implementation of the new urban agenda, which is something that, after listening very attentively to all the speakers just now, I only have one conclusion, whereby the effective implementation of the new urban agenda and also the SDGs, we have to come up with innovative solutions. And innovative solutions ultimately means new partnerships, as mentioned, whether it's private-public partnerships or whether it's cooperatives. Ultimately, that is how we can achieve the implementation, effectively achieve the implementation of the new urban agenda and, of course, the SDG goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think before we'd like to close, perhaps I would like to summarize or make some points which are very important. But I'm not going to do that because we are running out of time. One thing which I would like to do, though, is a commercial. Commercial is, this is a book we just published this year, is on the pathways to sustainable development. And that was published by the Springer, New York. Why I'm saying this? Because all those sort of topics we dealt with today, we are in fact looking for a pathway, isn't it, for sustainable development. So I think if you care, please go through that book, and then we will see that what was our intention to achieve those. Thank you very much, and thank you for attending.
So please remember, if we all help and do a little bit, it will make a big difference.